To see such a good-sized crowd here to take part in this. This is your Public Utilities Board, and they're going to be making the presentations. They're going to be running things, they're going to be handling things. So we're welcoming you all here on behalf of the City of Flin Flon. We welcome you all here, and we'll just pass it on to the people who are going to actually run the meeting. Right?
I'm going to stand up just for a second. I have some opening remarks I need to make, but I want to stand up so I can see everybody and everybody can see me. I would like to welcome everybody here this afternoon, and thanks very much for taking the time to attend. It's nice to see a big turnout. We obviously received all of your comments online, so we expected to see a lot of people here today, so we're glad that everybody made the effort to come out. So I have some opening comments, but I'm going to sit down to do that so it's easier for me to read while I'm sitting. My name is Sean McCutcheon, and I am the panel chair of the Public Utility Board for today's hearing. I hereby call to order this public hearing into the rate application of the Flin Flon Water and Wastewater Utility located in the City of Flin Flon. Joining me on the panel are board members to my left, Irene Hamilton, and to my right, Marilyn Capitani. And assisting the panel is the Public Utility Board Assistant Associate Secretary Fred McCutcheon, sitting off to the side, who will act as secretary to today's panel. There is an attendance sheet, as you all noted when you came in, and we would appreciate if you could register your name for our records. And to begin, I want to give some brief information about the Public Utility Board of Manitoba. The board is governed by the Public Utility Board Act and operates as a quasi-judicial body. There will be a number of points made in my opening comments that reflect this, and I also want to mention that there were a number of exhibits filed for this hearing. These include the city's application, the council resolution supporting the application, the hearing notice, and the submissions received by the board in response to the notice. A list of all the exhibits is available from Mr. McCutcheon and can be requested by email from the PUB office. We will run the hearing as informally as possible, but that still requires that we all be respectful and follow the proper rules of order. And if you have something to share with the panel, ask that you do so while the hearing is in progress. We can't hear anything about this rate application once we have adjourned the hearing, and to avoid any perception that we are accepting information after the hearing has adjourned, the board is unable to talk one-on-one with any of you in attendance in regards to this application. We appreciate your understanding of this part of our process. I also want to give you a bit of background on the regulation of water and wastewater utilities in Manitoba. With the exception of the City of Winnipeg, all utilities are subject to the Public Utility Board's approval in setting rates. Utilities are required to apply to the Public Utility Boards for approval to establish rates, revise rates, or to recover utility deficits. Utility rate applications are generally supported by a rate study, annual year-end audited financial statements, capital expenditure forecasts, and projections forecasts for future utility revenue requirements. While the Public Utility Board has general oversight responsibilities over municipal utilities, it does not manage the operations of utilities. That is the responsibility of the utilities owner, which in this case is the City of Flin Flon. The board's primary focus is balancing the needs of ratepayers with the viability of the utility. This means approving rates, reviewing operating deficits, and approving an appropriate recovery for operating deficits. Items such as adherence to water quality and environmental standards, taxation, the day-to-day operations of a utility, and other city matters unrelated to the utility are not part of what the board regulates, so are not the subject of today's hearing. The Public Utility Board has the authority to vary any application brought before it, so the Public Utility Board could determine the rates being sought should be approved as requested, denied, and reapplied for, or the rates requested be increased or decreased. Applications may be reviewed using a public hearing or by means of a paper-based analysis. In the case of your Flin Flon water and wastewater utility rate application, the Public Utility Board has decided to proceed with an oral public hearing because so many of you expressed your concerns. The Public Utility Board's decisions are delivered directly to the utility and placed on the PUB website. Board decisions are based on the evidence before it and are generally issued within 2 months of the hearing. Lastly, I want to note that the Manitoba Ombudsman has privacy guidelines for administrative tribunals such as the Public Utilities Board, and we are mindful of our obligations under those guidelines. Our decisions in respect of the application being considered will be sensitive to these guidelines. Personal information will not be disclosed unless it is appropriate and necessary to do so. However, we need to advise participants that these proceedings are public, and as a result, personal information protections are reduced. What this means is that because we are in a public forum, we cannot protect your privacy. And now I want to talk about the application before the board. Your current rates were set in Board Order number 12220, effective October 1st, 2020, and are based on a combined commodity basis plus a deficit rate rider that was built into rates. On November 29th, 2022, the board issued Board Order number 12522 and directed the city to discontinue the collection of the deficit rate rider on December 31st, 2022. The city submitted an application for revised water and wastewater rates for the Flin Flon utility on November 23rd, 2023. The application was accompanied by bylaw number 2023-20, read for the first time on November 21st, 2023, and given second readings on February 6th, 2024. The rate study stated the following reasons for the rate increases: decrease in general expense and increase in water and wastewater expenses due to the reallocation of the utility public works staff from general to water and wastewater cost centers. Increases in wastewater operating expenses relating to capital projects, which are expected to result in additional staff hours, materials, etc. Decreases in revenue collected on property taxes for utility expenditures expiring in 2024 and 2026, and to move the utility from a net operating deficit to a net operating surplus equal to the PUB guideline of a required 10% contingency allowance. The application included a request for approval and recovery of 2018 and 2022 deficits through a rate rider of $1.69 per 1,000 gallons to be recovered over 5 years, and a notice of application was issued on February 15, 2024. Stakeholders were given until April 1st, 2024 to respond to the notice. The board received 166 submissions from ratepayers, and these were sent to the city for an opportunity to respond. The submissions form part of the exhibits I mentioned to you earlier. The city's application has been available for review by the public at the city's office, and this was noted in the notice of application issued February 15th, 2024, and in the notice of public hearing issued April 12th, 2024, and June 20th, 2024. So we anticipate that interested parties have taken the opportunity ahead of today's hearing to review the application. Before we get to the Flin Flon Utilities presentation on their rate and deficit application, I'm going to explain how the hearing will be run today. First, we will hear the city's summary of its application for revised rates. A substantial amount of information has been placed before the board. This hearing gives the city an opportunity to clarify or amend, if necessary, their application. The summary will provide all of us who are present, including the panel, with a better understanding of the rationale for the proposed rates. And following the city's presentation, the board will have the first opportunity to ask questions. The board received an application to present from Mr. Warren Martin. If Mr. Martin is here, I will call on him next, and I will then open the floor for your comments or questions. All comments and questions must be restricted to the rate application now being considered, and your questions need to be directed to the utilities representatives because it is their application. To ensure this proceeding is fair and efficient, I request that everyone in attendance hold their comments until all presentations have been completed, and that at that time, as I mentioned, I'll open the floor for comments and recognize those of you who wish to speak. Once recognized, please state your full name for the record. Board procedures limit presentations to a maximum of 10 minutes to ensure everyone who wishes to speak has an opportunity to do so. I ask that you abide by this time frame. Also, for any of you who have documents or presentations, we would appreciate if you would provide them to the board's acting secretary, Mr. Mikitishyn, before starting your presentation. If you have material to present to the board and do not have extra copies, please provide your original to Mr. Mikitishyn after your comments have been made. At this time, I would like to ask if there are any members of the media present. Please direct any questions to Mr. Mikitishyn, the Public Utility Board's Assistant Associate Secretary, at the end of the hearing. One last note, and I don't think it's actually going to happen today. Sometimes we have iPads or laptops up here with us. We're not reviewing the local scores with free information in front of it, but none of us have an electronic device with us today, so this is moot. I will now give the floor to the City of Flin Flon to begin with introductions and make their presentation. Thank you for your attention.
There we go. I'll hold it. How's that? I will do some introductions. My name is Lynn Brown. I'm the CEO with the City of Flin Flon. We have James Wrightlin, who is our utilities person with the City of Flin Flon. And we have Dale and Travis Lyle, who did the water rate study for us, and we'll be talking through some of the slides as well. And of course, Mr. Mayor George Fontaine, who welcomed everyone. So I also welcome all of you, and we'll go through this process.
Thank you, Ellen. My name's Dale Lyle, and I've got Travis Lyle with me. We're with Way to Go Consulting, and we prepared the utility rate study. We're going to start off with the City of Flin Flon prepared a brief description of the water recirculation system for everybody's information, so we're going to start off with that.
City of Flin Flon's distribution system is a double main recirculating system that is fed by supply mains to all connections. Return mains bring unused water back to a common header where this water is then redistributed by the supply mains. Due to above ground shallow buried water mains, recirculation is required to keep the water moving and prevent it from freezing during winter months. The water distribution system in Flin Flon was specifically designed to prevent freezing of water mains placed in shallow trenches or above ground utilidors. The water is heated and recirculated through the distribution system to prevent freezing. The water distribution system in Flin Flon freeze protection is required in the system primarily as a result of low water temperature at the supply source and depth of frost penetration greater than the depth of the bury resulting from shallow Precambrian bedrock. Freeze protection is required. Water and sewer mains are laid in a common box utilidor on the surface where the rock is outcropping and at or near the surface in other sections. Each house connection has a supply return two-pipe connection. The amount of circulating return water being governed by inserting an orifice plate where supply and return lines connect inside the house. This orifice plate allows for controlled circulation flow to be maintained in the building service line. The City of Flin Flon heats the distribution water to 6 degrees Celsius during the winter months at the water treatment plant and number 1 heating plant. The city has identified certain house surfaces that are subject to freezing each winter. In order to alleviate this problem, a bleeder is installed in these houses and is turned on during the winter months. Thank you for your time and patience.
Okay. Okay. So just, we've got some slides we'll go through and explain the utility rate study. So the City of Flin Flon operates the Flin Flon Water and Wastewater Utility. The last water and wastewater rate application by the city to the Public Utilities Board was in 2022 and was denied in Public Utilities Board Order 125-22. Current water and wastewater rates were approved by the PUB in Order 122-20 with increases effective October 1, 2020 and January 1, 2021. So the proposed utility rate increases, and there's deficit rate riders that we'll explain farther on in this presentation. The current rates, and I'm going to go through a few slides to describe some of the issues with the rate setting methodology that's been used in the past in Flin Flon. There's a number of PUB orders and comments in the orders that had to be addressed as part of this rate study. One of those issues is that the current billing is based on a combined rate for general admin charges, water and wastewater expenses. It's all one combined rate. PUB rate setting methodology requires that administration overhead costs be set as a flat rate service charge that is a flat rate on each bill, and that water and wastewater be charged on a volumetric basis if there's meters, and in the case of Flin Flon, the majority of customers are unmetered, and that if in the case that there aren't meters, that there's a separate water rate and separate wastewater rate. So because there's currently just one combined total rate, we've taken and split that into a monthly service charge, a water rate, and a wastewater rate. And so those were based on our best estimations of how those amounts should be split. So the current service charge that we came up with is that it's $3.44 per month. And we see that service charge, which is a flat rate on each bill, going up to $7.09 in Jan of 25, up to $9.43 per month in January of 2028. And that represents administration charges overhead, and we'll see kind of the calculation for that in a further slide. The water rate, we came up with a current rate of $6.72 per 1,000 gallons, increasing to $12.44 in January 25 and going to $16.09 in January 28. Wastewater, current, we calculated it at $5.03, going up to $10.21 in 25 and to $13.52 in January 28. In addition to that, there's a rate rider for deficits that have to be recovered because the utility is in a working capital deficit position. The utility, in effect, owes significant money to the general fund and doesn't have sufficient cash, in effect, to cover the deficits that have been incurred. So there's a rate rider in addition to those rates of $1.69 on top of that. So I wanted to go through issues that were identified in past Public Utilities Board orders that we've addressed in this utility rate study. So PUB Order 9316 commented that, or indicated that the City of Flin Flon was required to establish a customer service charge, a water rate, and a wastewater rate rather than a combined charge. And that's what I previously referred to when we worked on the current rate to split it into those three components. PUB Order 9316 on page 12 indicated the volumes included in the minimum charges do not align with the board's recommended guidelines. and PUB Order 6717 commented or required that the city revisit the minimum consumption rates for customers with meter sizes of 5/8 and 3/4 inch. And the utility rate study is based on minimum billings for metered customers calculated in accordance with PUB rate setting guidelines. PUB Order 6717 stated on page 11, current rate structure is unfair to customers with meters versus customers without meters. And the utility rates are calculated based on total metered volume and an expected volume calculated for non-metered customers. The non-metered expected volume was calculated using average consumption per dwelling unit from Flin Flon's metered multifamily residential properties, which was 2,693 gallons per month in 2022. And so one of the situations where we were working with this rate study is that the single-family residential dwellings, which is the vast majority of the utility, don't have water meters. So the metered volume that we had to come up with as an average to do the calculations, we took the average consumption per dwelling unit in multifamily, because all of the multifamily dwelling units are metered. So research that we did, and we have documentation we can make available to the board. The research that we did indicated that on average, the volume decrease in consumption for metered versus unmetered customers is 22%. So, and that's logical when you look at it, that typically metered customers, they know they're paying for the water that they use based on the volume they use, and typically people use less water when they're metered. So the average that we came up with was that there's a 22% decrease when based on metered. And we also did some research, and there's an increase in consumption for single-family residential units compared to multifamily of 71%. So typically, multifamily units, duplex, fourplex, apartment blocks, the number of residents in each unit is lower than in a single-family residential house. So the average difference is that there's a 71% increase in water use in single-family residential. So we took and extrapolated the water volume that we used for single-family residential houses to come up with an average volume for those houses based on the multifamily water use. And that's the best information that we have for Flin Flon that we could use, because the single-family residential houses aren't metered. So approximately 87% of the utility customers are unmetered in Flin Flon. And so it introduces a significant degree of uncertainty in the unmetered consumption volume. The majority of utility customers have bleeder valves to prevent line freezes, which also contributes significantly to the percent of unaccounted for water, and we'll see that farther on in this presentation. So, and the one last item identified in past PUB orders that we addressed in the rate study, PUB Order 12522, stated the board will order the City of Flin Flon to submit a rate application using the rate study process following board recommended guidelines, and that's what we did as part of this rate study. So reasons for the utility rate increases, and I just want to put this a little bit in perspective. City of Flin Flon's utility is absolutely unique in Manitoba. The structural issues that are being dealt with here with the utility is constructed basically on rock with water and sewer lines that are above ground, and heated treated water has a significant impact, of course, on the operating costs and capital costs for that utility. So, and in addition, we're dealing with a case where the vast majority of the customers are unmetered too. So there's, it's just a very unique utility. 69% of the rate increase is due to the utility's operating surplus deficit, changing from a deficit. In 2022, the audited deficit was $1,091,000. And for 2028, we set the rates based on a forecast surplus of $527,000, a net change of $1.6 million. And the 28 surplus is required to meet PUB rate setting guideline requirements for contingency allowance and for a working capital contribution because of the working capital deficit position that the utility has been in for quite a number of years. 33% of the rate increase is due to utility debenture debt maturing. The utility debt collected on taxes results in principal and interest payments being revenue to the utility. So there's debenture debt outstanding that matures in 2024 and 2026 related to the water treatment plant and the wastewater plant. And that, under public sector accounting standards that are utilized by municipal governments across Canada, those requirements, or those standards, the revenue, the property tax revenue for the debenture debt for the water plant and the wastewater plant are collected in the general fund, and they're then transferred to the utility as revenue. And in the utility, the interest expense on that debt is an expense, but the principal payments are just net revenue to the utility. So what happens when debenture debt matures, the utility ends up with less revenue coming in because of those principal payments have been they cease because that debt's matured. So the other side of that is that property taxes go down because that debt's matured. So the property taxes for residents drop because that debt matures, but the utility is hit with that revenue is missing. So end up with a result where property taxes may go down, but the utility rates end up going up, and it's an offset. And there were increases, decreases in expense accounts for the balance of the changing rates. So just going through this, the 2028 utility billing revenue that's forecast, $5,383,000. The 2022 utility billing revenues were $3,049,000, so the forecast increase is $2,333,000. And that funding, that $233,000, is there's a number of reasons for that. There's a decrease in general or admin expenses, and that's basically just moving. There were the utility operations management expenses were being charged to admin or general expenses, and those have just been moved into water and wastewater expenses, and you'll see that the increase is farther down there. So water operating expenses, an increase of $113,000. Wastewater operating expenses increased $421,000. The utility debenture debt that matures results in a decrease in revenue of $771,000. And there's adjustments to depreciation, amortization, so the utility depreciation or amortization is recorded on the utility, the water lines, sewer lines, and the water and sewer plant. And there's a reduction in that net amortization cost of $223,000. And then the biggest piece of this is just taking the utility from a large deficit in 22 to a surplus in 2028, and that accounts for going from the deficit to the surplus, results in a $1.6 million of that increase that is required for. Deficit rate rider recovery. So the utility's in a working capital deficit position. It doesn't have the money to fund deficits when they're incurred in a year. So in 2018 there was a deficit of $372,000. In 2022 a deficit of $1,091,000, so a total of $1,464,000. So the proposal to the Public Utilities Board is that those deficits would be recovered over 5 years based on water volume. And so Flin Flon utility billings in 2022 were for 172 million gallons. And based on that, there would be a rate rider of $1.69 per 1,000 gallons of water consumed over the next 5 years to recover that amount.
So there's a number of capital projects that are included in this utility rate study. The amortization over the useful life of those assets, the funding as well. So for 2023, there was $2,084,000 for a lift station and force main, as well as $1.07 million for the Aspen Road water and wastewater lines. 2024, there's $3.2 million budgeted at the time of the rate study for the lift station number 4 upgrade. 2025, there was $1.2 million for an upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant, as well as $2.5 million for the 100 stairs tunnel pipes. Funding for these capital projects. So the city receives an annual grant from Hut Bay Minerals to offset capital and operating costs. Some of these currently planned utility capital projects are budgeted to include funding from the Canadian Community Building Fund or Gas Tax Reserve, the Hut Bay contribution that I just mentioned, as well as grants from the Manitoba Water Service Board. For 2026 and future years, an annual grant of $500,000 from Hut Bay is assumed to be going into the utility. Funding for most of these projects, I believe all of them, is assuming grants from Manitoba Water Services Board, ranging from 40 to 60%, depending on the nature of the project. So one of the calculations we have to do as part of the rate study is a calculation of the unaccounted for water, so basically the water loss percentage. So we've taken volumes produced in 22 as well as 23. We then subtract the metered water sales. We know that amount. We know the water amount that is delivered to Channing customers. We know the amount that has been sold at bulk. And then we take an assumed volume for the unmetered flat rate customers. So with all of those kind of known amounts and the assumed volume for the flat rate customers taken together, we have unaccounted for water, which results in a difference in 22 of about 54% water loss, or in 2023 of about 49% water loss. So one thing to note with the assumptions we have to make due to the large percentage of unmetered customers, there's a pretty large degree of uncertainty in these numbers, but this is the information that's available, so this is sort of the best that can be done. So as far as the water volumes we've used for the rate study, we've taken the 2022 metered water and wastewater volume billed, as well as that delivery volume I mentioned for the Channing customers, and that assumed flat rate consumption. So we then take this total amount and we'll use that further on. You'll see in some of the slides, we use this amount to actually calculate the water and wastewater rates. So I'll just kind of walk you all through how the customer service charge was calculated. So as Dale mentioned before, this is to recover your general costs. A big driver of that is the administration cost allocation to utility, as well as amounts for billing and collection, some training, and so on. So those amounts less any revenue sources that would be attributed to general expenses. So if there's penalties for late payments and that sort of thing, the net of those two amounts gives us the amount we need to recover on your administration charge. So for 2028, we're forecasting that amount to be $196,000. In addition to that, because of the working capital deficit position that the utility is currently in, a Public Utilities Board requirement is that working capital contribution also be included in this customer service charge. So that's equivalent to 1% of general water and wastewater expenses, and it's recovered on your customer service charge. So for 2028, that amount works out to about $57,000. So that, in addition to your net general costs, give us the total amount we need to recover on the customer service charge, $253,000. So that amount divided by the number of customers would give us an annual customer service charge. Divide that by 12 gives us our monthly customer service charge of $9.43. So from the current rate, as Dale mentioned, this has kind of been extrapolated just to give us something to work off of because it currently is a combined rate. So from that amount, we have front-loaded the proposed rate increases. So of the total required amount that we need to get to up to in 2028, 61% of the total increase is proposed to come into effect in January of 2025. And this is done in order to prevent an operating deficit in 2025. So after that amount, there is 3 years, the remainder of the required increase, 13% of the total increase each year. So it's $3.44 currently per month. As Dale mentioned before, it'll be going up to $7.09 per month in 2025, and then eventually up to $9.43 in 2028. So the water rate is calculated to recover your net water operating expenses. So purification and treatment, transmission, distribution, repairs, amortization or depreciation on your water assets, interest on water-related debentures, less any secondary revenue sources. So if there's any bulk water sales, or more significantly for the Flin Flon utility, hydrant rentals. So that's revenue that is charged from the general operating fund. The net of those two amounts needs to be recovered on the water rate. One thing to note, with the unique nature, for lack of a better word, of the Flin Flon utility, a lot of these operating expenses are just higher. That's sort of the nature of the beast, relating mostly to that, heating the water and that sort of thing. So we have our net water costs projected out for 2028. That's $2.9 million. In addition to that, there is a contingency allowance equivalent to 10% of your operating expenses, also included. That's for unexpected costs, water breaks, and so on. That works out to $265,000. These amounts are then reduced by any revenue brought in for water debt payments. So money is raised on property taxes, comes into the utility, it's revenue. So that's an offset, as well as capital grant amortization. I'll just briefly explain what that is. So capital grant amortization, if you have a large capital project, for example, let's just say a $100,000 backup generator. So you would recognize that $100,000 over the useful life of that asset. If you think it'll last 10 years, each year you would recognize $10,000 of amortization expense. If you get a grant for, say, $50,000, you would also recognize that grant over the useful life of that asset. So $5,000 each year. They offset each other, so the net amortization expense of the utility would be $5,000. So basically, this just offsets the amortization costs that are included in that $2.9 million net rate costs. So all in all, with all the numbers worked out, the amount that needs to be recovered on the water rate is $2.78 million, divided by the water volume used for the rate study, gives us a required water rate in 2028 of $16.09. And same as the customer service charge, the proposed rate increases for water and wastewater you'll see as well. 61% of the total required increase comes into effect in 2025, and then 3 years of equal increases after that. Wastewater rates, same idea as your water rate, except for this we're recovering your wastewater operating expenses. So you have your net rate costs for wastewater. In this case, it works out to $2.3 million. There's also a contingency allowance, 10% of your operating costs, wastewater included. So that's $196,000. There's currently, in 2028, there's no debt that's related to wastewater capital projects, so there's no offset there. There is some capital grant amortization for previous wastewater projects where you received grants, so there's an offset there. The net of all those numbers works out to approximately $2.3 million, divided by our wastewater volume used for the rate study, gives us a required rate of $13.52. So for the working capital position of the utility, the Public Utilities Board requires that utilities have a minimum working capital position, and that's equivalent to 20% of the utility expenses. Working capital is calculated by deducting your tangible capital asset balance from the utility's accumulated surplus, adding to that any utility reserves, and adding any outstanding debt balance as well. And I'll go through this in a bit more detail in the next slide. Working capital is negatively impacted by operating deficits because they reduce your fund surplus. With utility reserve levels being part of the utility working capital calculation, as reserves or the fund surplus are drawn down, working capital is negatively impacted. So the Flin Flon utility has been in a deficit, a working capital deficit position for a number of years. In 2015, the working capital deficit was approximately $8.6 million. And in 22, as of the most recent audit, it was a deficit of $8.78 million. So this, I apologize, the numbers are probably quite small. This is just kind of year by year the working capital position of the utility, and it shows the impact as rate increases come into effect. So, for example, in 22, the fund surplus, you would take, that's basically money, funds that the utility has. You would deduct the tangible capital asset balance, that's money or funds that the utility has spent. You'd add long-term debt, because that's money you've received, and you would add the utility reserve as well, because that's money available. So With all of those numbers worked out as of the most recent audit, again, a working capital deficit position of about $8.76 million as rate increases come into effect. Obviously, this is a pretty significant hole to dig the utility out of, but as rate increases come into effect, working capital is increasing by, in 2028, about $1.5 million each year. So the next few slides, we just have some charts showing the actual impact on minimum and average bills. So this first one here would be the impact on a 5/8 inch meter minimum monthly water and wastewater bill. It includes the proposed deficit rate rider for recovery of the 2018 and 22 deficits as well. So currently, that minimum for the 5/8 inch meter monthly bill is $73.94. The minimum would be going down. So in 2028, the minimum would be $40.73. So this is because currently minimum bills are based off of consumption, minimum consumption of 6,000 gallons per month. Proposed rates are based on minimum consumption for metered customers of 1,000 gallons per month. And this aligns with the Public Utilities Board rate setting guidelines. I believe most other utilities in Manitoba all use 3,000 gallons a quarter or 1,000 gallons per month. So for the impact on average monthly metered 5/8 inch metered water and wastewater bills, with the current rates, it would work out to $68.07. With the proposed rate increases, it would be increasing to $140.96 in 25. That's the big jump, and then 3 years of kind of even increases, ending at $181.58 in 2028. And so this is based on an average 5/8 inch meter. I believe most of the meters are either businesses or multifamily residential. So this is per meter. You know, often for example, multifamily residential, it'll be one bill to the house and then it's split up. There will be multiple tenants in there, etc. So. And then the impact on unmetered bills. So currently, the way the bills are calculated, I think the billing is based on about 8,500 gallons per month, kind of assumed consumption. We're proposing that the unmetered customers are billed based on the average consumption of 5,500 gallons per month. So currently, those monthly bills would be $103.32, going up to $140.96 in 2025, and then the 3 years of even increases after that, ending at $181.58. And this final slide here, again, I apologize, you likely can't see these numbers, but these two charts are minimum bills across Manitoba converted, so it's based on the same volume as yours, 1,000 gallons per month, that have had rates recently approved by the Public Utilities Board. So Flin Flon, you can likely see the yellow at least highlights and orange. So yellow is your rates without the rate rider, orange is your rates with the rate rider. The current rates are down at the very bottom right, so the current minimum bill of $73.94 per month. With the change from 6,000 gallons to 1,000 gallons per month, your minimum bill actually then decreases as you kind of go in sync with all of the other utilities.
Yeah, that brings brings our presentation to a conclusion.
Thank you. I'll ask my fellow panel members to start with any questions.
Thank you. It's a complicated system you have here for sure. So I have a couple questions. One is about the bleeder lines you spoke about. Mr. Lyle, I think that was Mr. Lyle Sr. I think that was your part of the presentation. Does the water from those bleeder lines go through the meters where there are meters?
I don't think so. No, the bleeder would be before the meters. So,
Okay.
So the big piece of the unaccounted for water is the bleeder lines.
Is the bleeder lines?
Yeah.
So there's not a lot you can do about that unaccounted for water then, and that's all treated water that goes through those bleeder lines, right? So that's
Yes.
expensive water,
Yeah.
relatively speaking.
Treated heated water.
Treated heated, so even more expensive.
Yeah.
And it's just the nature of your system then, there's not a lot that can be done.
Yeah, some of those we don't even know about. Plumbers or homeowners themselves put those bleeders in, and we don't even know of a lot of them that are up. The ones that we do, we try and notify people to shut them off during the summertime,
Yeah.
and a lot of them we don't even know that are out there. So.
And you talked about your capital plans on one of the other slides. That was, I think, on slide 10. Is there any plan to install additional meters? Because you did speak about how meters encourage more conservative consumption of water, and so that could help manage rates into the future, but I know it's also expensive to install those meters, so I just wondered if there's any plan to look for grants or to do any work on the meter side.
Yes, one of the things that we've talked about at council with regards to some of the things that we've discovered through the water rate study was something that we needed to look at. As you indicated, though, it is quite expensive, so it's something that we'll have to study. We wanted to get through this process and then take a close look at that.
Oh, that makes good sense, thank you. I wanted to ask about, on slide 7, you talked about the PUB rate setting guideline requirements. So I just wondered if you could speak a bit, either of the Mr. Lyles, about the accounting standards. And I mean, we all have to operate under these accounting standards. So the Public Utilities Board didn't write the standards, we operate under them. But I just wondered if you could speak about those accounting standards and principles that we need to follow.
Sure. So the PUB rate setting guidelines utilizes the audited financial statements that each municipality in Manitoba has to produce annually. And those statements are based on public sector accounting standards that the CPA Association sets across Canada. And they include, included with those, that standard is annual amortization expense, or depreciation, another word for it. So anyone who's run a business or a farm would be familiar with depreciation that's incurred for the asset, whether it's a building or a water line, a water plant, sewer plant. They depreciate in value based on age, and that amortization expense is included in the cost for the utility, so that's an expense to the utility. And in addition, public sector accounting standards treat, and this is counterintuitive, but it treats the money that comes in from general operating fund for property tax debt, or debt that's paid through property taxes. In the utility, it treats it as pure revenue, and the utility, under public sector accounting standards, the interest only is an expense, so the net principal that comes in each year is revenue to the utility. So if the utility issues big debt and it's raised on property taxes, it's a bonus, it's great money coming into the utility. But when that debt expires, which is the case we have with Flin Flon Utility, with the water and sewer plant debt expiring, then that hits the utility and that revenue disappears. So that is certainly a big piece of what's happening with the rates. So the public, and from those public sector accounting standards and the audited statements, the PUB has set a process for setting rates, and they have guidelines for how the rates are calculated across the province for all utilities except Winnipeg. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentations.
Thank you, and thanks for your presentations. Just a little bit of follow-up on what Ms. Capitani was talking about. Insofar as unaccounted for water, is the necessity for bleeder lines something that could be potentially reduced by an increased insulation factor within the utilidors? Is that a possibility, or is that something that is not pursued?
It definitely could in some circumstances. Like I said, some of them we don't even know that people have installed them themselves. That makes it really tough. Because it's a recirculatory system, if you have a water line going into the house and going back out, one line breaks or gets pinched off, and their line will freeze all the time unless they put a bleeder. With the bleed, they don't have to fix that. So if they install their own bleed, they could run water and not ever fix that. So it doesn't cost them anything. So we have to find a way to eliminate those ones that we don't know about, which is hard. And the ones that we do know about, some of the spots we can insulate, but it's dead end lines too. If you have a long run where there's a dead end line and it's not going anywhere else, sometimes we need to bleed on both lines, just keep the water moving, or it is going to freeze. With the shallow bury, even if you insulate it, it's really tough. It's minus 40 and it's on bedrock. It's pretty tough to get it so it doesn't freeze.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Lyle, I have one question. Just I'd like you to provide a bit of clarification, if you could. On page 5, you referred to a 71% increase for a calculation of 71% for increased consumption in single-family detached as compared to multi-family residences. Could you just provide a little bit further detail to elaborate on that?
So we did some research on that, and multi-family units, duplexes, apartment buildings, typically, the average number of people in those units is lower than in a resident single family. It's my understanding, I think the last Statistics Canada census was showing generally about 2.5 people per residence, and so maybe on average a single family house might have 3 people in it and an apartment might have 2, or whatever the numbers. But the research we did came up with saying that there was a 71% increase in the number of people in a residence as opposed to or a single family residence as opposed to a multi-family.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, if I could just add one thing to that. Another issue would be the like multi-family residences. There wouldn't be a yard that they would be dealing with. So watering your lawn, that sort of thing, also a factor.
Thank you.
Also, thank you for your presentation. A couple of questions. Deficits. So we're still dealing with existing rates until 25. Do you expect future deficits in 23 and potentially 24? So the rate riders are dealing with. I assume that we don't have audited statements on those years yet.
Yeah, so before the proposed rate increases kick in, we were forecasting net operating deficits of about 320,000 in 2023, and in 24, about 560,000.
Just to be, for my own clarity, with the proposed rate increases, you're saying in 2025 the utility will be at a break even. You're not making any progress on tackling the operating or the operating surplus fund deficit, but the utility be running on a break even as of 2025 with that proposed rate increase?
Yeah, so based off of the forecasts for 2025, with the kind of front-loaded increases, the utility is expected to run a surplus, net operating surplus of about $60,000, so basically breaking even. In 2025, as far as working capital goes, there would be a forecast improvement from 2024 to 2025 of approximately $150,000. So just kind of the first step towards reducing that working capital deficit.
Okay. So it's pretty clear in your presentation the two big challenges obviously were the reduction in, or the elimination of some of the tax revenue, and then trying to tackle the significant working capital deficit. In the discussions in your rate study and working with the city, did you talk about the pacing of trying to reduce that working capital deficit? Like you're between 2025 and 2028, the pace of the... So your rate increases in the following years, the 13%, I assume that most of that increase is going to tackle the working capital deficit? There'll be a portion of that will be inflation on the operating cost, but a big chunk of that will be, because at the end of the 2028 you've got a significant operating surplus that you can use, correct?
Correct. So
so my question is more about that pacing. If you looked at, because of the significance of the rate increases and the fact that tackling that single issue is a big part of what's driving rates.
Yeah. So the annual operating deficit to bring the utility into balance in 2025. The bulk of the increase was, what percent was it? About 61. So 61% of that increase is set to go into effect in 2025 to just to break even in 25. And unfortunately, the financial situation that Flin Flon Utilities in, there's no, typically what we like to do with utility rate studies is to step increases evenly over 3, 4, 5 years, however far we're going out. But in this case, because the utility is running deficits and it's in a huge working capital deficit position, there's no luxury of kind of trying to do equal stepped increases. So the big increases in 25 to bring it into balance, and then the increases in each of the following years, 26, 7, and 8. That's just to bring the utility to have the contingency and the working capital contribution, because it's in a deficit, that PUB guidelines require. So we haven't, typically, if a utility's got large capital projects, we might build in a transfer to reserve for future capital or something, and the rates would go up more, but the working capital would get better. But in this case, we didn't add anything extra because the rate increase is really significant. So this is like the bare bones, just to bring the utility into balance in 25, and then to raise rates enough to meet PUB guidelines so that the contingency and the working capital contribution are in there. So there's no extra built into this. We would like to have because of the working capital situation, but the rate increase is significant. So we left it at that. We did, and there weren't really any discussions about increased transfers.
I do want to add something, though. We
we did not have a deficit in 2023. And it doesn't look like we'll have a deficit in 2024 either.
It doesn't?
Do you want to put that on the record, please? Sorry.
Yes, on the record, we did not have a deficit in the utility in 2023, and based on projections so far from this year, we will not likely have a deficit in 2024 either.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So we do have a presenter that registered with the Public Utility Board to present tonight, so I'd like to start with that individual, Warren Martin, if you are in attendance.
Do you need one further?
I have. Hi, my name is Skip Martin, Warren Martin. I'm pretty overwhelmed by all the figures that I've heard tonight. And it seems like I just heard a big contrast there, a big contradiction between we're in deficit or we're not in deficit. It seems like they're disagreeing. But anyway, that's not my, sorry. So the city's request for a 73% increase in utility rates over 4 years is, in my opinion, ridiculously excessive in relation to people's income. For instance, in the previous 4 years, according to Stats Can, seniors receiving the Old Age Security and Guaranteed Income Supplement had an increase of 15%. The average Canadian unionized worker had an hourly wage increase of 13% over the previous 4 years. So a 73% increase in utility rates over 4 years is ridiculously out of touch with the economic reality of most people. If the city is forecasting a large expenditure in utility expenses, then it should pay for it the same way the water and wastewater plants were paid for, namely by debentures. This way, debt can be amortized over many years, keeping utility rates at a more reasonable level. Also, grants could be applied for over the next 4 years to help pay off anticipated projects, such as was done recently in Creighton. Their planned $3 million sewer and water upgrade will cost them $250,000 after grant money from the federal and provincial governments is applied. Creighton will be paying less than 10% of the cost of this project. Like, I'm hearing a lot of estimates. So much of these figures are based on pie in the sky, just pick out numbers, because we don't have meters and they're just guessing at everything, it seems like. But also, it has been stated by the city that general tax revenue could not be used to subsidize utility rates. However, on the rates page of the Public Utilities Board website, it states, whether or not debenture servicing costs are better borne through utility rates or taxes will vary with the circumstances. This determination is made by the municipality and residents, end quote. So utility costs can be paid for from general tax revenue, and so any money saved by implementing cutbacks and finding efficiencies in the city's other operations could be used to subsidize utility rates, keeping them at a more reasonable cost. Another problem with this excessive rate increase is that our rates are already high, and because Flin Flon's water system is not metered, a person has no choice but to pay the full rate. By contrast, the city of Dauphin has water meters, so its residents can reduce their utility bills by reducing their water usage. Dauphin has also applied for a utilities rate increase over 3 years, which would amount to about what our rates are today. That's what they'll be paying in 3 years. However, a senior on a fixed income there could save $894 annually by reducing their water consumption to the minimum charge. Their counterpart in Flin Flon, in the last year of this application, would be paying $1,797 more per year than they do, with no chance of reducing this amount by conserving water. So without meters, taxpayers of Flin Flon have to rely solely on the city to help them live within their means, and a 73% increase in utility rates is an action completely oblivious to the fiscal reality of its citizens. This rate increase is excessive and should not be allowed. Instead, the board should order the city to submit a new rate increase more in line with other Manitoba municipalities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
3% a year, not 50 or 70% increase.
So before I open up the floor, I should maybe get clarification, because I was the one that asked the question that created the confusion. So could we get some clarity on the 2023-2024 potential deficits?
I can talk about the difference between the years in 2022 when we had the deficit that was over $1 million. We did a project that year that went seriously over budget. And so in the past year in 2023, we didn't have a major project that went over budget. So we just, the 2023 audit does not show a deficit in the utility for that year.
Yep. Thank you.
Just looking at the statements, there was the debenture debt payment that's shown doesn't come close to lining up with the actual debt payments. So we had, there's an adjustment of $3.5 million? There's an adjustment of about $3.5 million that the auditors have to make for prior years that is positive for the utility, but they didn't show the proper transfers from general fund to utility fund related to debenture debt. And this is the first I've seen the 23 statements, but the amount that they're showing as principal payment, as debt payments that came into the revenue, into the utility as revenue, is about $1.5 million higher than it should be. So we'll have to analyze and see what's going on. But there were some issues with the audited statements and how the debt transfer to the utility was being shown that has been corrected or is in the process, been corrected for 23.
It's in the process of being corrected. That happened in 2020 and 2019, I believe.
Just in answer to your question about the 23 statements, we'll have to take a look at them to see exactly what's going on with those, to see what the real number is.
Okay, thank you. All right, I will open up the floor to anybody that, if you could, as I stated before, if you could come up and if you have a comment or a question, state your name first, please, and then.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Trucci. I'm a property owner in Flin Flon. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody. It's a tough situation trying to deal with something like this. First, for a little bit of clarity, did I hear right are the metered properties going to possibly have a reduction in cost or stay basically the same? I know that they have a volume reduction from 6,000 to 1,000 gallons, but if somebody had a meter and they only used 1,000 gallons a month, are they going to have a reduction? That's the first thing, before I say much more, I need to know.
Yeah, that's correct. So your current minimum volume would be 6,000 gallons,
Okay.
going to 1,000. Yes.
So, next question. Is the residents of Flin Flon that are unmetered, do they not have an option to pay for their own? Because I know they have to, if they do get a meter, they have to pay for it. So is that not an option to try and reduce usage?
We would really like to reduce usage, and we would really like to be able to see in terms of meters how we can do that. So we are going to be talking about that once we get through this rate study. And I'm also going to go back and take a closer look at the current bylaw, because there is some discussion there about meters. So.
Okay. The other thing I'd like to comment on is the percentages of unmetered residents seems extremely high. And I'm an ex-building contractor in this community for close to 30 years. I drive around this community from one end to the other. I've had experience where I bought a property and all of a sudden I noticed there was water coming out on the ground in the street. And at first it was spring and it seemed normal. And all of a sudden all the snow was gone and it didn't seem normal anymore. Only to discover a water line break. I don't have any scientific data, but I would venture that a very, very high percentage of our wasted water in this community is due to unknown and unforeseen water leaks due to our deteriorating infrastructure, which has been neglected, not by necessarily this council or this staff, but for many years there wasn't a proper maintenance program in place to deal with this. And it's just got older and worse and worse. And now we're in this position where a whole pile of treated water is just running into the ground. And I think if the whole community was metered, we would know how much consumption there was. And we would know exactly how much leakage there was. And I realize it's a very hard thing to deal with. And I'm not blaming anybody, but I think that is part of the reality of the situation. Okay, so again, all we can do is keep working at that and try, and others have been, I know, but like first of all, it's a hard thing to find. Things can run underground and because they don't necessarily come out. They go down, they go around the walk, it leaks here, and a mile down the road is where the water comes out. So, it can be very difficult to find. Anyway, I'll just leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks to the panel and to all the folks that came out tonight. My name is Greg East, and I'm a landlord in town. I don't live in Flin Flon. And as usual, thanks to Skip Martin for doing all of the research that he did. I think we were all edified and informed by what his research was, as usual. And as usual, Skip is looking out for the little guy who can't afford to pay, or gal, maybe a retired person in a small house. So I want to remember to say this, that as a landlord, most of us, I think, pay the water bills for the houses that we're renting. Because if we don't pay, if we try to pass that on to the tenant can sign on with a rental agreement to pay the water bill, but if they don't, and we don't find out about it, we have to pay it anyway. So it's just simpler for us to pay it ourselves. So the fact is that for a lot of people living in small, older houses especially, that are renting, for me at least, they can't afford to live now. I don't want any violins played, but the water increases are going to be eaten by the landlords. They can't be passed on to tenants that are having a tough time already. There are 1,968, or roughly, single-family residents in this town. About 160 odd multiple family residences are 2 it's called. You would know that, I guess. And 300 and some commercial buildings. So of the 1968-ish, I could be off by a couple here, but I did talk to Dauphin about this then to make sure that I had the numbers right. So of the 1968 single-family residents, just about 100% of them are not metered. There was a look at metering, you remember this, I think a few years ago, and for whatever reason it was deemed to be too expensive, and I'm sure it's not going to be cheap, but certainly 100% agree with the concept that Skip brought forward, and so did Paul, that if people did have meters, if it was subsidized by the province, because it would be an environmental thing, really, saving water, certainly saving money, because we are heating all the water in the winter and also treating it, as one of the ladies pointed out. So I think we'd all like to save water and save on the bill. And again, thanks to Skip for the research that he did, because I hadn't thought of it until, and again to the council, because you're trying to solve a problem that has been, it's not a new problem. Most of these councillors are fairly new, or almost are brand new in many cases. They didn't cause this problem. They're stuck with trying to fix it along with the rest of us, and we have to pay the bill. But I like what Skip, some of the options that he brought forward, which such as, are there not some other options for redebenturing and amortizing over whatever, 15, 20 years, rather than bumping the rates 40, 50, 60 bucks more per month, which is going to be hard. Thank you.
Bring it down, it's too tall for me. Hi, my name is Ken Polachuk. I'm a local resident here all my life. When we talk about deficit, it's a bad word to use because it's not really a deficit. All we've done is taken money that was allotted to pay for roads, to pay for maintenance around Flin Flon, and reallocated it to our sewer and water system. So now we're expected to pay again to fill up the deficit that we paid for once, and now we're going to pay again to put more money as a surplus to this system. So, like I said, it's not a deficit. It was money. Drive around Flin Flon and see our roads. We haven't touched roads in Flin Flon in several years, and it's getting to the point that. But that's where the money came from. It didn't come from. When I was on council, that was brought up to us, that we had to cut out road maintenance to pay for this exorbitant amount of money that the government had given us money that we had to put our 30 or 40% into. So that's where the money came from. So it's not like we borrowed the money. It's not a deficit. It's money that was allocated for something else. I've been here since in the last 4 years. I've lost about $300 of my buying power through inflation, as every pensioner does in this room. We've lost that. Now I'm going to lose another $40 or $50 a month in buying power, because they seem to think that maybe we can just suck some more money out of us pensioners. And we're on a limited budget. We don't get the 8 or 9 or 4% increases every year. You know, it's starting to look attractive to move to Creighton maybe, or to move out to the lake when we don't have to worry about these things, because it's frustrating to me. And I know in previous councils we dealt with the same things, and the government, which should be helping us, a lot of times didn't help us. They put rules and regulations in front of us that we had to do, and we have to account for it. So that's all I've got. Thank you very much for you guys to come to Flin Flon and present to us and the presenters. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Jeff Henderson. I own houses here in Flin Flon. I no longer live here. My name is Jeff Henderson. I own houses here in Flin Flon, but I no longer live here. But I'm heavily invested in the community, and I'm quite interested in this, obviously. I didn't come prepared. I wasn't aware of it until too late, so I made notes as people were speaking. So I might backtrack a little bit, but please bear with me. In 2014, I listened to Skip Martin do a presentation at Town Council. At that time, the City of Flin Flon was going to do a special services levy. They were going to back out protective services of the property taxes and put it onto a special services levy. Is that better? I'd like to apologize now. It sounded good to me. In 2014, I listened to Skip Martin do a presentation in City Council. And in it, he warned of some of the rising costs to seniors and low-income people. So at that time, they broke out protective services from property taxes and then made it basically a per capita or per dwelling flat rate. And at the time, people like Skip and myself were thinking that that was going to be a relentless, regressive taxation as opposed to progressive property taxes. With the benefit of 10 years, we found out that Skip Martin was right because it basically tripled. Every year, there is a little bit more taken out of the progressive property tax system and put into a special services levy. And Manitoba does not have a minimum tax for property taxes. That's part of the problem. So in 2014, if memory serves, it was 2014, the City Council of the day wanted to preserve some of the higher valued houses from a relentless increase in property taxes, so they decided to do this. And all that's done now is put a significant portion of the property tax burden on low-income people. This is a version of that. We don't have a minimum tax in Manitoba. This is a de facto alternative minimum tax. If you continually take costs out of the progressive tax system and put it onto flat rate per dwelling units, the low-income people that are not sheltered with the cost of living increases pay a progressively greater burden of running the city. That can be a choice, but I just wanted to make sure you're aware that that's been happening in Flin Flon. Every year, the shift is from high income to lower income in terms of running the city. I wish there's a fellow who's a plumbing contractor, his name is Virg Horrocks. I wish he was alive today. He passed away a few years ago. In approximately 2006, I helped him a little bit. I wish he was here because I'd like his version of it. So somebody here can correct me on some of the history, but in approximately 2006, he came bustling into the office. He wanted to do financial statements because he wanted to get into a position where he could get bonded, because he was going to bid on the contract with the city to put meters in every house. And it was one of the initiatives that the City Council of the day had pushed, I believe, and I'm willing to be corrected on that. But he did a significant amount of work to lay the framework to put meters in every house, because at the time, everyone understood that we were wasting a lot of water, had no method of tracking it. And people were some people were overpaying, some people were underpaying. Water was going into dishes, as mentioned, with no scientific method of data collection to actually account for all of that. That died. I don't know when it happened, the exact occurrence, but it went from, I'm excited about putting meters in every house, to we're not allowed to put meters in every house. I would like more information on that. I don't know who to ask that, but I would like you to get more information on that, because it seems to me that that should be part of this, is meters in every house. But it's not a new idea. It's one that's been come about a couple of times in the past year. I strongly suspect that there are some liberties being taken with operating expenses being dumped into utilities. I would like somebody to take because we're making so many assumptions on shaky numbers, and then taking audited statements, and there's too many issues with the audited statements, I'm not confident in how numbers are allocated. One question I've asked since about 2005 is how many liters of fuel go into the heating plants. I've never gotten that information. I started with Mark Holt, and I've gone through a couple of the economic development officers. I would love to know how many liters of fuel we burn here every year, and if there's a plan to reduce that. I know that, again, in approximately 2011, University of Saskatchewan engineering students came up here and did a feasibility study to use geothermal heat off of the mine shafts to replace the heating plants here. And they had not a proof of concept, but a preliminary paper that was done. They presented it to the city council and saying that there's enough heat in the water columns in the 777 mine shaft or the south main shaft to replace one of the heating plants. I would love to know what happened to that and if numbers were done on the city side to prove it wrong or prove it right, but it was too expensive to proceed, or if there's a potential to reduce some of those costs by using some of the untapped geothermal heat we have here in town. In 2001, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation did a little survey of Manitoba municipalities. At that time, they found that Flin Flon had one of the lowest utility rates in the north, but also comparable to southern Manitoba. We've obviously changed since then. I don't know if there's any new information along that line, but at that time, Flin Flon had very, very low utilities. And I'd like to know, along with, let's see, money can fix all problems. There is no problem that money can't fix. Costs are out of hand, we have to recover those costs, charge people more. But with this package, I would love to see a plan to reduce costs or to streamline or to find some efficiencies. We can always pay more, but it would be nice to waste less and cost less. There was one chart in there that was done on 1,000 gallons, but most people are building 5,500 gallons, and there was one just showing, and it just seemed an odd one, and I'm hoping you guys are going to have a lot of time to review all of these. And I don't want to waste the time here, but it just seemed like it was a rose-colored look at what people's savings were going to be compared to what the percentages of metered versus unmetered was. The meter lines, I'd love to see some math done on that. Because I'm going to, without my own data in hand, I'm going to say I'm not believing that the majority of the unaccounted water is meter lines. But it also scares me that we have meter lines that the town doesn't know about. And it just seems to me that it reflects, again, data collection and a more like a streamlined process of identifying these things. I know that like an anecdote from my side is that for about a year and a half I complained about water coming into my basement at 24 Main Street. But everybody I talk to is always new information. But that's treated, heated water flowing into my sump pit, being pumped into the storm sewers or into the sewer system. You had asked about insulation. I'm going back in time again here. Once upon a time, Andy Jadell was the foreman here in town. And I'm going to say that was approximately 2010, but I'm not sure. He had hired me to do some spray foam insulation in some of the sewer boxes. And it turned out that although it worked, it was too expensive, so it just didn't happen again. So now we're doing wood shavings again. Or we always have done wood shavings, which are effective, surprisingly effective. But there's a lot of above-ground utilidors in town where the insulation is degraded. Boxes get opened up, and if you walk around, if you do a tour, you'll be surprised at how many naked and uninsulated sewer and water lines there are in town. And again, it'd be nice to have a program that, but I recognize that there isn't unlimited staff time and there's not unlimited staff budgets. So I recognize the harsh realities of running a city. I'm just going to say that the issues with the audited statements of 2023, that back and forth of that makes me nervous. And I'm hoping I misunderstood what was happening. But I'm hoping that the audited statements are accurate, or is it the auditing process that's the back and forth to make them accurate? So I'm a little bit nervous on that one. I understand that. Thank you.
Sorry for coming up again, it's Greg East again. Just to clarify the answer to the question that Jeff had asked about merged works, most of us do some plumbing in our houses. His phone number is written on more bathroom walls around town. And a lot of times for debts that he didn't collect. I believe, and now it's probably 12 or longer years ago, so it's no reflection on anybody that's on council at the moment, but I believe it was a council decision not to pursue the water meters. It may have been financially oriented, but as a landlord, I'll tell you this one last thing. I've been a landlord for 40 years in this town, and one thing that I learned, because I've been called cheap and frugal, and when it comes to water expense, that's certainly the case. Your ear becomes tuned as a landlord to running water. When I walk into a house, whether it's one of your houses or one of my own, I will hear the water running, and I will immediately wonder, is that a sink? Is that the float valve on the toilet? So the problem is, I have some multiple unit buildings, and those ones are metered. And you can run up a water bill of $2,000, $2,500 over a long weekend if with the old 5-gallon toilets, if they were running full bore for the whole weekend. I know because the house that I now own and used to look after with 5 suites once got one for in excess of $22,000 for a 3-day long weekend because a 5-gallon toilet. None of them are 5 gallons anymore, but back then they were. Now it's 1.6 liters. But that thing running full bore for a full weekend chewed up a lot of water in the $2,000 range. I think the city forgave some of it, and that was good of them to do that because it was no fault of anybody. But if you put meters, as there are on the multi-unit residences, every homeowner will be attuned to that water running. And they will hear it if it's running. They will notice it. They'll fix the gasket on their tap. They'll fix the toilet if it's running, and we can save water that way. If there's been a study done recently on what it costs per unit to put the meters on, we should know about that. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Bonnie Nave. I've been a resident of Flin Flon for just about 29 years now. Some of the statements that the city made in general, blaming unmetered residents for the use of all the excess water, that's false. We have so much water running down our streets from unmaintained sewer and water lines, and it's not necessarily the fault of this city council. It hasn't been maintained for many, many years. But to then take money from our roads and our other projects to put it into the deficit for the water, there's got to be some more attention paid to the efficiency of what our workers in the city do. There are numerous places in town that are dug up in the same place year after year after year to fix water lines. Yes. They aren't done properly the first time, so they go back years and years in a row. The same water leaks down the same hill years and years in a row. Like, to expect the unmetered or any of the taxpayers in this town to pick up deficits from mismanaged taxes, mismanaged funds, mismanaged work ethics, hiring and firing over and over again of city workers that are supposed to be stepping in to fix everything and they don't, and within weeks they're gone. Like, something needs to change, and it doesn't need to necessarily fall on all of it fall on the taxpayers. I look around tonight and most of them are seniors. How are they going to afford a 70-some% hike in their water bill? And they're forced to pay it. If they don't pay it, it goes on their taxes. And if they don't pay their taxes, guess what? They lose their homes. This is too much. It's too much. People can't afford it. They just can't. And until our councillors, our mayors, our utility boards realize that this is out of line, people are going to suffer. And instead of having a tax base to help you pay for these things, your tax base is going to get smaller and smaller as you force people out of your homes. There has to be cuts in other areas. Instead of fixing the same breaks over and over again, how about do it right the first time? How about not getting rid of the people that have that know this city, backwards and forwards. That's been happening a lot lately here. I'm sorry to tell you that's just the way it is. And how about we finally get a council that, I'm sorry, but your presentation, hey, great, thanks for doing it, but it was boring as hell, and I'll bet you half the people here didn't understand the word you were talking about. How about put it in layman's terms and be a little more transparent about what the city is doing and how it was doing it? I had no idea that the money for revenue for our roads was being put into this instead. Like, stop the tomfuckery, get together, and fix it.
Hi, I'm Bernice Stoltz. So one thing I know of, a lot of wasted water is in the old Flin Flon Hotel. That is leaking, I've been told, about 10,000 gallons that have to be, that they hire somebody, the city hires somebody to come and pump out quite frequently, like all the time. There's thousands of gallons constantly just running in there, and they hire someone to pump it out, let it keep running in there, hire someone to pump it out. We're paying for that. Also, on one of the presentations, it said an Aspen Road. Was that for Aspen Grove? Okay, so, and one of the assumptions was that in our multi-family dwellings that there's not many people. We have a lot of low rentals here that have lots of people living in each apartment, and even people living there that aren't listed as living there because they get a lot of friends and family. And there's a lot of single family dwellings that only have 1 or 2 people living in there. And I would pay to get a meter put on my house. I'd pay if I was allowed to do it, because we don't use much water at all. And it's gonna come down to it where you see your neighbor watering their lawn, I'm gonna go egg them. Like, I mean, but that's just how it's going. I mean, I probably won't, but it's just not right. I mean, we're being priced out of this town. I'm looking at retiring within the next couple of years, and I'm thinking, okay, do I go to the lake? Do I go to Creighton? Because we're being priced out. Yeah, just can't afford to stay here. I mean, they're increasing our water, so it's water and garbage. But taking away, you can only have so many bags now of garbage. And I've got a son who has 4 children in his care, and 2 of them are babies, and for him to just have 4 bags of garbage a week is pretty hard. Otherwise, he's got to pay again to get an extra bag. But I mean, we're just being priced out. And there's so many, I know in my back lane, I'm in the back lane, somewhere underneath, there's a water leak. There has been for years. There's, in the spring, and when we get a lot of rain, there's like a buried hole in the back lane. It starts rising, and then it goes down, and there's lots of leaks, and we're paying for them. And I know, like, this council, like, they're pretty new. I mean, these problems have been going on forever and ever and ever, but why wait until after we double our water bills to look at getting meters? Why not look at it now before we double our bills? Thank you.
Hi. My name is Jen Mazzo. I just have a comment to make on what we were talking about, meters and water usage. I did go to a couple city council meetings a couple months ago in the spring, and they were talking about this issue then. And they did say that they had looked at water meters, and they're very, very expensive. And I understand that, like, it's a lot. Maybe it's not possible, maybe it is. I mean, I'm really interested in something like an environmental grant or something that we can get in that regards, but I understand that I don't know everything that comes to when it comes to meters. That being said, one of the comments that was made by one of the members of the council was that one person had mentioned meters, you know, is that a possibility? I would like that for myself, and you know, maybe if we watered our lawn less, or if there's certain usages that we did less would make a big difference. And okay, we all want that. We don't want expensive water or have to pay more utilities. And one of the comments that was made by one of the members was that won't make a difference. There's too much waste that not watering your lawn wouldn't make a difference. So in that case, it really does make me wonder about things like metering. I know that there's a lot of leaks. I know that there's ones that I didn't even know about, I heard about today. And I know some people, they kind of measure how much is leaking when they have it happening around their home. But I am really wondering how much exactly do we even know is being wasted when it comes to water leaks. And also, when it comes to metered, would we be expected to pay for those water leaks, or would we only expected to pay for our own usages? That makes a really big difference when it comes to what we're expected to pay. So, I mean, those are all really good questions. Also, when it comes to all these numbers that are being drawn up, I understand there's not a lot of data to work with, but that also leads to so much assumption. And when it comes to our own personal use of water, well, some people, they're going to try to use much less, but they know that they're only a drop in the bucket, and they're going to know that their neighbor or someone down the street doesn't care at all, is going to use lots of water. So you don't really feel like there's any difference you can make if it has to do with your own usage, then you have control over it. But especially when it comes to waste that we don't have control over, then really there's so little we can personally do. This water is just, it's not coming from our own homes or our own usage. So of course, I can understand the concern, especially with seniors. This city has a lot of seniors, and they don't know how to pay for these increases, and the increases aren't necessarily of their own usages or their own faults. So I certainly understand the concern, and I also, I second that. I think there's a lot, I'd like to see a lot more analyzing of what can be done and what really is going on as well. Thank you.
Once again, I'd just like to clarify a couple things. In most cases, a water line is leaking. It's not going through your meter. The only leaks that go through your meter are from your toilet, your taps, anything internally in the house. And I'd also like to commend the city crew. One of my rental properties, I had suspected that there was a leak in the area running into my sump pump, which I installed last year. And the backyard was completely flooded, a sheet of ice, my yard, the neighbor's yard. There was obviously an issue, and that shouldn't even be running in the wintertime. I contacted the gentleman sitting over here for utilities. He come and talked to me, had a look at it, said there wasn't much they could do until the spring, and he put it on the list, and it wasn't very long in the spring. They got there, they found probably 2 or 3 leaks in the same general area, dug it up, got it fixed, and it's been better. So I thank you for that.
I had a presentation earlier, but now I'd just like to ask a couple questions of the group that did the study. And I was wondering, do you know, like there was a 50% loss of water in the system. That was the estimate I heard. Do you know how much money would be saved if that 50% was not lost? Like, if that was stopped?
Yeah, we can't really speculate on that, but what we see typically. Somebody have a comment, or?
Oh yeah, you speculated on the up numbers, have you not? Like, most of these numbers have been made up.
If you, sorry, if you're going to have a comment, please.
Go for it.
To the mic.
If not long enough, I don't need a mic. I'm sure people can.
Okay, let him answer the question, please.
All right, give her.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, like what we typically see with utilities that are metered is water loss rates in the range of 10 to 15, maybe up to 20%. The problem we've got with Flin Flon utility is that such a high percentage of the customers are unmetered. So yeah, we do have to estimate numbers because we don't have the metered volumes to use. So I can't speculate on that. It would be, you know,
but you did estimate that
yeah,
there was a 50% loss.
Correct.
And I'm just wondering what that would amount to.
Your variable costs. Yeah, your variable costs. So in theory, you should save, you know, that percentage of your electricity that's related to the water pumping and the heating and those direct costs for that water. It would be significant, but I'm not going to sit here and do a half-hour calculation while we're answering that at this point.
Okay, well,
it would be material, and the costs for Flin Flon, especially the high water loss rate, and whether it's breaks in the street or the bleeder valves, obviously they've got to run, they've got a purpose, but are they all being turned off in the summer? The city doesn't know, you know, some of those bleeder valves where they are, and are they being turned off? So there's a lot of cost involved with water in Flin Flon, especially that's not in other communities because it's being heated too on top of everything else.
I have one other question, and that's the fixation on 2028. I'm wondering why all this has to be done by 2028. It seems like it's kind of a hurry up, you know, like, could this not be put off for, you know, like, to keep the rate low?
So typically, utility rate studies, the municipalities we work for go out 3 to 4 years with their utility rates, because part of this is there's a lot of estimation that's involved in what are the future costs going to be, and a lot of the utilities in Manitoba are dealing with capital infrastructure issues. Flin Flon's not alone in having utility lines that are, you know, that should have been replaced a few years ago. So typically we go out 3 to 4 years. In Flin Flon's case, because of the magnitude of the rate increase that's required to bring the utility operating into balance and try to start to deal with the huge capital or working capital deficit, we took it out 5 years. So just to try and mitigate that increase to bring it into compliance with PUB rate setting guidelines.
What has changed with this system that it went along until not too long ago, and now all of a sudden it needs a 70% increase? Like, why? Like, it's a system that, I mean, it was unmetered in the past. The water was heated in the past. Pipes were insulated in the past. Why all of a sudden is everything going to the moon?
Well, cost of living is only up 3%.
Yeah, actually, and just that comment there, so what we've seen in utilities across Manitoba is that there's been a significantly higher increase in operating and especially capital costs than what inflation would indicate. The capital especially has really jumped dramatically. There's a lot of utilities that are dealing with capital infrastructure issues and vastly increasing costs for those. But part of, like, Flin Flon Utility has not been good for years. It's sitting with a working capital deficit of $8 million. The audited financial statements show that it owes the general fund $12 or $13 million. There's an audit adjustment that I referred to earlier that has to be done from prior years, but for about $3 million. But the utility, like, The utility is a separate entity from the general fund. It's operated as a separate entity. It's regulated by the PUB because it's a monopoly. It's a separate fund, and it's being funded by utility bills. So it hasn't been in good shape for years.
Who is owed this money?
The general fund. So property taxes pay for police, fire, garbage, roads. Utility bills pay for the operation of the utility. The only crossover there is that debt that's issued on property taxes is collected on your taxes, but that is money that's really the utility funds. So they are two separate funds, and the utility's not in good shape.
I guess that's something I don't understand, is if it's so far in debt or in deficit, who is owed that money? Like, who's missing out on $1 million? Like, I don't know, I guess I just don't understand how finance works.
City owns the city. Exactly.
Like,
yeah, it is. It's all the cities, but it's two totally separate funds, and it's funded differently. The utility is funded by your utility bills and consumption, and the general fund, roads, garbage pickup, fire, police, they're funded by your property taxes.
No, but like everything is working, right? Like the water's being heated, the water's being distributed, everything else is going along. Who is owed that $1 million? Like, it's functioning. Like, there's something I just don't get there.
Yeah. It's a separate fund, and it's regulated by the Public Utilities Board as a monopoly, and it owes the general operating fund those monies.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. If I owe $8 million, I owe it to somebody. I owe it to the bank. I'm $8 million in the hole. Who's that $8 million in the hole? The city carrying debt for that $8 million, or exactly, or is it just?
Yeah, that's outside the bounds. I'm just saying the audited statements show that the utility owes, and well, 13 million is what was it, 12 million, whatever that was on there. So.
Greg East again, one last comment. Our water and sewer system has been running, I think, for about 75 years in Flin Flon, since about 1949. So this deficit position has been built up. And it's been mentioned many times tonight, and it's quite true that our system is probably unique, maybe in Canada, maybe in the world, who knows. So it's an antiquated system, it's worn out. And now we're the remaining taxpayers in Flin Flon after we've lost our one industry that we had since 1927. We now have 50 jobs here in town as opposed to 1,500 previously. So we're in a tough situation here. If there are other methodologies, as Skip has been suggesting and others have suggested, for rejigging the way that we think about paying this off over a longer term, that would be useful, I think. So another aspect, you guys are with the Public Utilities Board, and I've been kind of an observer of what the Public Utilities Board does with Manitoba Hydro. I know that Manitoba Hydro has to apply each year for an increase, and usually you guys or somebody else from the PUB gives them about 3%, even though that they probably need a lot more than that. And they can, we know that they have a huge debt, about the same size as the province of Manitoba's debt. But nonetheless, they're only allowed about 3% per year. Maybe more in next year, but 3%. So why is it that maybe you're still thinking about your decision on this? We should be looking at another methodology for lowering, as some of the speakers have said, this rate of increase, spreading it out, paying it off by other methods. My last comment of the night. Thanks.
Coming up a second time. When it was first made public that the city was putting in for requesting this increase. I don't know if I was at a meeting or if I read it in the paper, but they said it would increase for 4 or 5 years, then once the money was built up into whatever fund, then they were going to decrease our bills again. Will that happen? Will they be decreased after the 4 or 5 years? Can we get a guarantee on that?
I think that what happens is after, let's say the 2028 year is over, we'll be doing another water rate study, and then the water rates will be determined at that time. So if there was a lower cost for the utility, then it could make some sense. I also, while I have the mic, I also want to talk a little bit about some of the conversations that I've heard with regards to water leaks and wasted water. And so I'm going to ask James just to speak briefly to some numbers that we have. In 2022, when we did the water rate study, James can tell you what the liters per second were being recorded and what they are now.
First, can I finish? Sorry. I really want to stick to, like, it was said in the paper at a meeting that after the 4 or 5 years, our bills would be going down again.
I believe it was me who said that, and it was not that. What I said was that we would be doing a water rate study, and we would look at the bills at that time.
And how much? No, it was said that, yeah, the bills were going to be decreased. But how much are these water rate studies going to cost us? How much do they cost? I'm just wondering, because that's all coming out of the big fund for the city that has different, I mean, there's some for roads, some for water. I don't understand it either, but I'm imagining these studies aren't very cheap either. I don't know.
The studies are around the $20,000 mark. So let's talk about the water liters per second that I was mentioning. So in 2022, it was one of our highest years in terms of water leaks and recorded liters per second that were going through our system. This year, we are substantially down over the last 2 years, which will bode well for us as we continue with our utility, because as has already been mentioned, when we have water that goes through our system, it costs us money. So James, if you can just talk about those two rates, please, where we were at back in 2022 and where we are at today.
2022, we were averaging around 60 liters per second. We got a high of 72 liters per second. Right now, that whole year we did not, our goal is always to get below 44 liters per second. I have 2 trains in the water treatment plant. One breaks down, the other one's got to make enough water to keep the city running. So we want to be below 44 liters per second. That year, not one day were we below 44 liters per second. That means if we had a mechanical failure, we would have ran out of water. This year, we haven't had a day over 44 liters per second. The last 4 days, we've been 33, 34 liters per second. So we're at half the flow rate that we were in that. So we have reduced the flow rate substantially.
Hey there, my name is Julia Rumpel. I am a newcomer, I guess. I've been here for 4 years with my husband. We bought our first house a year ago, and it's been awesome. We do love the town. But I just wanted to say that I did my own calculations because I can do math. And on Stats Canada, the average Canadian reported in 2021 uses 401 liters per day. So I did that times the population number that I could find, which was last cited, just like a simple Google search, and it was 5,185 people. So I'll give you this after so you can see my breakdown, but at the end of it, they are right. We are losing 50% of our water. But I have a real number based on the average Canadian, not just a makeup number. And secondly, my husband is a plumber, so he does get to see some of these things in town. There is a lot of water in that hotel, a lot. There was also a lot of water under Walmart that they were fighting about to see who would fix it. Would it be the city or would it be the lease landowner? I think it's been fixed, but that was over the winter that was leaking, and that is all treated water. So it's me and my husband and our now almost 2-year-old daughter. We're first-time home buyers, like I said, and we're regretting leaving Saskatchewan to come here.
Hi, I'm Bill Quantum. I live on the Saskatchewan side of Flin Flon. I know Saskatchewan government paid for our pump house on the Saskatchewan side. Did you take any of that in consideration in all your numbers? And does Saskatchewan still help you with the people that live on the Saskatchewan side? Because we don't get the cuts anyone else gets. When we were putting our back up, anybody else that put that back up so it didn't go in, they all got money from Manitoba government. Everybody that lived on the Saskatchewan side got nothing. But I do know the Saskatchewan government paid for one of the pump houses, because it is on the Saskatchewan side of the border. But we do pay our taxes to you. I'm just curious. Do you get money from them still?
Actually, we can apply for grants through Saskatchewan, and it's strictly population-based. So you're allowed every 5 years so much money per the amount of residents you have in Saskatchewan. You don't
Which
have
you
to
have a few.
Yeah, we do have some. So right now, I think we're getting mature that we could apply for some grant for upgrading the lift stations on the Saskatchewan side. But as far as Manitoba giving you money towards those backwater valves or anything else,
We weren't Manitoba.
Yeah, exactly.
That was your reason.
Yeah, I guess that would be through the Manitoba government. We wouldn't be able to help them.
But I'm asking, have you even told them that Saskatchewan does contribute if your grants, your whatever, when asked, they did pay for the pump house?
Saskatchewan will contribute when we put in a grant application, the same as Manitoba.
I didn't
and
see it.
As far as the per capita funding from Saskatchewan, it's based on 122 people, and Manitoba is close to 5,000, so it's a very small contribution.
Was enough for the pump house.
Hello, my name's Barry Thompson. I'm a local landlord. My point with this is right now for $73 and change, we get 6,000 gallons. That works out to, I think, $0.02 per gallon. Under the new one, it's going to be, what was it now? Just about 4. The meters rate is going up 350%. That's totally unreasonable. You know, you're saying that, okay, they can get it down to, it's only $1,000 bottom line. But you have, especially rental people, which don't pay the water and garbage, they're gonna take a half-hour shower. I got one building that at one point I had 6 people living in it, and they were using 12,000 gallons a month, every month. That's a $500 water bill every month. I can't put, and that's out of 2 suites. I can't put up my rent $250 a month. I could do $20 a year, the whole building. You know, they're like you say, the way they put it in the figures there, 57% drop in price the first year. No, because you're only getting 1,000 instead of 6,000. Like for the $73 that I get now, for the 6,000 gallons, will cost me $240 with the new rates. That's way too much. It's way too much of a jump. You know, I understand everything's going up. We owe a lot of money, but the few small businessmen that are left, you can't break them. And this is exactly what this is turning into. Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot something last time. Also, I just want to say a lot of those bleeder lines are folks just being advised to leave a tap open in their homes over the winter. It's not a physical thing other than their own fixtures. So it will be on their meters, those bleeders, if we didn't get like actual bleeders. That's it. Thanks.
All right, is there anybody else? I'd like to, before I close the hearing, I'd like to thank everyone for the participation. It's really useful for the panel to hear all of the comments as part of the process that we go through. And my last comment would be very nice to be in Flin Flon. I've never been up here, so it's really nice to see a community that I'm not familiar with, beautiful part of Manitoba. And thank you for your hospitality and with all your presentations this evening. So with no other comments or questions, I'm going to close this hearing. And thank you, everyone.